Welcome everyone to EIkon, and I am really excited to be here with you guys as we kick off this new series. And you know, we find ourselves here in July. Is it crazy that anybody else, you start seeing back to school stuff in the shopping? It just blows me away. I'm not ready for that, so Target, shut it down. I still want to believe it's summer. We're about halfway through the year though, and so I'm curious, how many of you in this room started off this year and you had some New Year's resolutions, right? And it's July now, and we're about halfway through the year. I'm curious how we're doing. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I've made New Year's resolutions and I get halfway through the year, they're more like New Year's suggestions, right? And you're like, oh yeah, I was gonna do that. And there's been some times that I've decided, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna buy some new piece of like workout equipment or some new gym thing. Anybody else ever do that before? A couple of you guys, yeah, sure, both of you, thank you. Well, one year I remember, and I actually stuck with this one, but I decided that I was gonna do P90X. Has anybody ever done P90X with Tony Horton? Yeah, absolutely. And his jokes, his like cheesy jokes get worse when you've heard them like 50 times, right? And I decided I was gonna do that. So I bought these two things. Now, does anybody know what this is? Anybody? Yes, this is a yoga mat. So hopefully dust doesn't fly off when I throw it out. But yeah, this is my yoga mat that I bought, and I bought this sweet yoga mat, and then I got this. Anybody know what this is? A yoga block. This is for people bad at yoga, right? So I bought it, and I got these things, and I was like, I'm gonna do this, and because yoga was one of the days of P90X. And I'm gonna be honest, I remember when I looked at the different days and core synergistics, and I was like, oh, that sounds, painful, and I looked at these different ones, and then I saw yoga as one of the days. I was like, oh, yoga. Yoga's easy. That's basically gonna be like stretching, right? Because like yoga, and I was like, oh, I can do this. And then I did yoga, and I realized yoga's evil, right? Like yoga's short for devil, right? So I realized it was horrible. Like I thought here's the thing. I watched Tony do it, and here's how it works on the videos. This guy, Tony Horton's doing it, and they always have multiple people in the room that's doing the different moves. And they'd first pan to some guy that was like part human, part Gumby, right? And he just like bends in these ways that you shouldn't bend. Like it just shouldn't be possible. Like, oh, he has like Gumby bones. That's how he does it. So he's balancing on an ear or something, and he's like all twisted around. And then they go to someone that's doing like a little bit more simpler move. And I remember I watched it and I was like, oh, so you just like one leg in front and then you twist and bend one arm through the legs. And I was like, oh, that's how you do it. And I did it, and I realized I can't do yoga, and that it's actually really, really difficult. And what was so strange is that I could watch it and I could listen to it, but that didn't make me able to do yoga. And it's this crazy thing because I found something out that actually, when it comes to yoga and when it comes to many things in life, that actually it's doing yoga that actually makes the difference. Doing makes the difference. The more I did yoga, the more pain I was in. No, the more I did yoga, I actually got a little bit better. And at first I had to use this yoga block like this, and then I could use it like this. And there are some times that I didn't even have to use the yoga block because the more I did yoga, the better I got. Now here's the thing. I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking, what on earth does this have to do with like church? Like, why are we talking about yoga in church? Like, I don't get it. Like, is this like, and now we're launching a yoga ministry. No, like this actually, believe it or not, this idea ties exactly to what we're gonna be talking about this week. You see, we're kicking off this brand new series called James the Just. And what we're gonna be doing with this series is we're gonna be going through a letter that James wrote. Now, James is the brother of Jesus, and in church history, they actually call James the Just, hence why we're calling it that. And he wrote this letter that we know as the book of James. You're so smart. Yes, all these theologians out there. And we're going to be going through this letter just one chapter at a time. So we're going to start off with James chapter 1. And James talks about this idea that doing is what makes the difference. Let me show you what I mean. Here's what James says. James says in chapter 1, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. So here's what he's saying. Listen, if you're just listening to what I'm saying, that doesn't count. That would be like me watching Tony Horton do yoga and going, oh, I am now a yoga master, right? Like that doesn't just listening to these things and thinking you're a pro, you're actually lying to yourselves. And in fact, the more I listen or the more I watch someone do yoga makes me no better at yoga. Like, do we have any yoga pros in the house? Like anybody love, maybe not a yoga pro, but you love yoga, you do yoga, you have a yoga studio thing. Yeah, a few of you guys. Okay, so some of you guys even do this thing called hot yoga that I think Dante talks about in one of the 7 circles of hell. I think hot yoga is one of those, right? So if I were to show up to your yoga studio, to your yoga class, and I was like, I'm just gonna sit back and watch you guys do yoga, does that make me like a yoga expert? No. You know what that makes me? Creepy, right? Like if I just show up at your yoga studio, it's like, I'm just gonna watch. That makes me super, super creepy. So if there's some guy that's like, I'm just here to watch, like you go to a different studio, right? So watching someone do yoga, listening, thinking, oh, I'm gonna learn just by listening, you're actually deceiving yourselves. Why? The reason why is listening actually isn't learning. Listening is not what learning is. I mean, that's a part of it, but just listening isn't learning. You see, I'm not good at yoga. I'm not at all. I will break something if I tried that right now. But one thing, I was trying to think something that I'm decent at, and I'm not saying I'm amazing at this, but one thing that I'm decent at is my dad, growing up, he loved to target shoot. Not a real big hunter, but he's like a chemist, so he reloads all his own ammo, and there's a science to it, and he knows velocities, and it's just ridiculous. But he did a lot of target shooting. So when I was younger, I did a fair amount of target shooting growing up. And one thing that I've gotten pretty decent at is actually shooting handguns, shooting pistols, which will come in handy as my daughter gets older and starts dating. Like that skill will come in very handy. So that's one thing that I've gotten pretty good at. In fact, I took this course where I had to get certified, and I was there with a Marine, with an Army infantryman, and I was the only person with the perfect score. Like I'm decent, right? So if I brought you up and you've never shot a gun before, if you're in this room, it's like, I've never shot a handgun, and I brought you up on stage, and we probably wouldn't want to shoot a gun on stage. Actually, so scratch that. If we went to a field, right? If we went to, somewhere where there was a shooting range, right? And I sat down and I told you and I explained, hey, okay, listen closely. Here's how you grip the handgun, and here's how you acquire a proper sight picture. And actually, you don't want to focus on your target, but you want to focus on your front sight. And I explained all this, and you don't want to pull the trigger, but you actually want to squeeze the trigger slowly. And I explained all of that to you. And I said, okay, now shoot. Odds are, if you've never done it before, you might be marginally better than you hadn't been without the explanation, but you're probably not going to be that great. Because why? Because listening isn't learning. It's actually, again, it's doing that makes the difference. It's the doing that makes the difference, because listening isn't learning. And you see, this is the concept that James is getting at. He's saying, listen, if you just listen to what I'm saying, if you just listen to the words of Jesus, but don't actually do them, then you're fooling yourselves. You're not learning anything. But sometimes we don't understand this. Sometimes we don't kind of get this concept. And James actually takes it a step further. He goes, let me really explain this. Let's see what he says here. He says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. This is what James is saying. James is saying that someone who listens to the words, I don't want to blind anyone who listens to the teachings of Jesus, but doesn't actually do them, is like someone who looks at a mirror and sees, man, there's a problem, and doesn't do anything about it. See, here's the funny thing. All of us woke up this morning, right? And I would argue probably all of us at one point stepped in front of a mirror, and when we woke up, we saw something and we were like, duh! And what we saw in the mirror we didn't like, right? Because our hair was all crazy and our breath was kicking, and like it was not a win. And you know what we did? Here's what I know about every single one of you. You spent some time in front of the mirror, and I know how long you spent in front of the mirror. You wanna know how long every single one of us spend in front of the mirror? Until it gets better, right? Like we step in front of the mirror and we think, okay, that's not a win. So I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna do something about what I see until it gets better. I'm gonna fix what I see. Nobody, no one, looks at a mirror and says, oh man, like my hair's messed up and I need to shave. And you see all these problems, go, oh well, and you just go about your day. You know, the only people that look at a mirror and see that their hair is crazy and all messed up, and then they just go off and they don't do anything about it, it's grade schoolers, right? Like I have grade schoolers, right? And I know they wake up and they run downstairs and their hair's all crazy and you're like, have you been in the bathroom? You looked in the mirror and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna go play. And they like run out the door and they don't, like clothes are like orange and red and teal, and it's like they just don't care. They just run out the door. Grade schoolers do that, right? Like they just don't care. Or how many guys, I've got young kids, and there'll be times that they're like playing over at a friend's house and they'll call and and they'll ask to spend the night, right? In parents, we've been through this before, and you go, well, gosh, I mean, you don't have anything. Do you need me to bring you some things? Do you, so you can spend the night? And the grade schoolers, they're like, bring me something. Like, no, like I'm fine. I don't need anything. And you're like, well, what are you going to sleep in? Like, my clothes, what I'm wearing. And you're like, okay, what are you gonna wear tomorrow? You're like, what I'm wearing? It's like, I have clothes on, Mom. Like, I don't know if you don't understand this. And to them, it's like, no, I don't need anything. I'm good. Grade schoolers, they'll look at a mirror and they don't do anything about it. But us adults, you know what we do? We actually have like bags of tools, right? Like if I were to spend the night like at Steve's house, like we do, slumber party time. So I'm spending the night at Steve's house. I'm gonna actually bring things with me to his house for that next day. Ladies, I've seen some of you guys. You got these bags, right? And you've got all kinds of tools and machinery and like things that you bring with you. I've seen some ladies that have tackle boxes. I can kid you not. I'm like, oh, so you're fishing. And they're like, no, it's just makeup. And I think like, what are you, painting a wall? And you've got like, you've got these like spray things and deodorant, that's a win. And we've got like these lotion things and chemicals of some kind, and we've got like all kinds of, we've got this bag of tools. So when we go to someone's house, we like bring that, we're like, no, I'm gonna be prepared because there's gonna come a moment in the morning that I wake up and I look in the mirror and I know I have to do something about what I see. Why? Because doing is what makes the difference. If I were just to go, man, I wish someone would have shaved my face. Oh, well, I'm out of here. Like, oh man, I really need to brush my hair today. I probably should brush my teeth, but I'm just gonna walk away. Like, what if we did this? And here's the thing, in church world, sometimes we can use this excuse of prayer. Now, here's the thing, I believe in prayer. I do pray. We've done series on the power of prayer. I'm all for it. But sometimes we use prayer as an excuse to not do something in the church. And here's what I've seen before. I'll talk to someone and they're explaining that their marriage is in shambles, their marriage is falling apart. And I go, what are you gonna do? And they're like, brother, would you pray for me? And I'm like, yes, I'll pray for you, but like that's not just gonna fix it on its own. You actually have to do something about it. Or someone's explaining and they're like, man, I'm making some really poor choices. I'm looking at things online that I shouldn't, and I just keep failing in this way. And I go, okay, what are you gonna do? And like, I'm just gonna pray. And that's, again, I believe in prayer, but sometimes we use that as an excuse to not do anything about it. And we think that just saying like, oh, I'm praying about it, just negates any action required on our part. And the thing is, the thing about this is we actually have to add action to our faith. We actually have to do something about it, not just say, hey, I'm praying about it. I mean, that wouldn't work in the real world, right? Like if you came into work and your hair was crazy and you just woke up and you just walked into work and you walked in and your boss said, hey, are you okay? It looks like you just rolled out of bed. You go, oh yeah. You pray for me, maybe it'll get better, and you like went to your office, your boss would be like, excuse me? Like what? Or like someone's like, hey, you want a mint? You want some gum? And you just go, just pray for me, hopefully it'll just get better throughout the day, pray for me, Like, no, that's great. Like, sure, I'll pray for you, but you actually have to do something about that also. And sometimes we think in the church that when we show up here on Sunday morning, that somehow through osmosis, things in our life just they just change. Well, I listened to what the preacher said. I even read that verse in the Bible, so I'm gonna change, right? The thing is, God doesn't take attendance. God's not going, oh, John was here today, so I'm gonna go ahead and change this in his life. And Sally, she was there yesterday serving at that volunteer thing, so she was there, so I'm gonna check off her attendance. It doesn't work that way. We actually have to do something. And that's why here at EIkon Church, when we were talking about the kind of church we wanted to become, and what we wanted our mission to be, what we wanted to be about, we decided our mission, we wanted it to be really, really simple. So simple that people would get sick of hearing it over and over. Our mission is to help people become more like Jesus. That's it. That's our mission. That's our goal, is we want to help people become more like Jesus. Because there are people that believe all the right things, but they're not becoming more like Jesus. There are people that will cognitively assent to something. Yes, I believe that truth, but they don't do anything. They're not becoming anything more like Jesus. And when Jesus gave the Great Commission, he said, I want you to go and make disciples. And a disciple is someone that's trying to become more and more like their master. So we don't want to just create a bunch of people that believe the right things. We actually want to help people become more like Jesus. We want to help people become more like him. So actually James takes this idea a step further. He's talking about, if you look into a mirror and you forget what you look like, that's the same as just listening and not doing anything about it. And then he goes a step further. I want you to see what he says here. He says, but whoever looks intently into that perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it. And I want to pause just here for a second. But whoever looks intently, this word intently, I think is really important because sometimes we don't understand this concept of intently. Like, what does it mean to look intently at something? And it's like a lot like this mirror. You may have noticed that on one side it's a normal mirror, but on the other side there's like these three different magnification mirrors. Now, these are intently mirrors, right? Like when you look into them intently, most of the time it goes like this. You're like, oh, I'm gonna look into, because I don't know if you've seen these mirrors before. Ladies that struggle with insecurity, I get it now. Like those things are terrifying, right? Because you're like, oh, look, I've got some pores. And you're like, no, those are like crevices, right? Those are the Marianas Trench of pores, right? Like these things, I don't know if you've ever been to a hotel and they've got like the big mirror and then they've got that little intently mirror off to the side and you're looking, you're like, oh, okay, I look all right. And you look at that mirror and you're like, like I look horrible, right? That's an intently mirror, okay? So he's saying like, whoever looks intently into the perfect law. So he's saying you like really look at this deeply into the perfect law that gives what? It actually gives freedom. Here's what's kind of crazy. Here's what's weird is we get this twisted a lot. Growing up, I got this twisted a lot because when I looked intently into the law, into the Bible, into the teachings of Jesus, I didn't always equate that with freedom. I equated that with something different. And a lot of Christians I talk to, especially ones that kind of grow up in church, and they have these traditions, they have these things, and they think about what they were taught growing up. And they think about what they've heard other people say when they say the Bible says this. For me, I can say this. For me, growing up many times when I looked intently into the perfect law, it could be summed up on one 3x5 note card. And you could just write on that note card and it just said, no, right? And that was what the perfect law said to me. Like, oh, that girl's really pretty, no, right? Like, or hey, can I go hang out with those people? No. It's like, oh, I'm interested in no. And it felt like, for me, many times, the perfect law, when I looked intently into it, it just felt like this big no. But here, James, the brother of Jesus, what he's saying is that actually gives freedom. And the thing is, to understand this, it took me several years of growing up. So I remember growing up in youth group and being 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and hearing people, leaders of mine, talk about purity, talking about honoring God with my body and talking about the importance of someday not being someone else's greatest regret. And to me, that felt more like shackles and chains than it did like freedom. That didn't sound like freedom to me. And I understood it many times as no. But what I came to understand as I got older, to the best of my ability, when I honored that. And one day when I got married to Kelly, I realized the freedom that brought, that I wasn't bringing a bunch of baggage into my marriage, that I didn't have to have some awkward conversation of, I need to explain this one time with, this person and this thing. That it actually gave me freedom. Now listen, if that isn't your story, that's fine. You can still have freedom, but we have to understand that the law isn't just some big no. The law actually gives us freedom. It's a lot like as parents when we tell our kids, like, hey, kids say, we want freedom to play in the streets, and they hear, no, you can't play in the streets, not because we don't want them to be able to do whatever they want. We want them to actually live, right? We don't want you to get hit by a car so it feels like no, but actually what it gives them is it gives them freedom. And that's when we look intently into the perfect law, that's what it gives us, is it gives us freedom. James continues on this idea, and he says this, he says, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. Now here's the thing that sometimes we tend to think. We tend to think like, oh yes, if we do the right things, that God will bless us. Like it's as if that God has this blessing wand, and it's like, if you only do this, then God will bless you. And if you do this right thing or that right thing, and it's almost like this carrot that God dangles out in front of you to get you to do the right things, and you need to do this, and if you do that, then you get this extra little blessing carrot. Now that's not at all what James is getting at. James is saying there's like this path of blessing that exists. And listen, God wants that for you. So if you just follow that path, you're walking in blessing. If you actually do those things, then you'll experience blessing. It's just, there's freedom there if we'll choose to walk in it. But how do we walk in it? Not just by listening, but by actually doing. By doing something about it. See, sometimes I think some people, especially if we've been a Christian for a while, we tend to think like, oh, I want something new. I want something deep. I want this like deep theological truth. And sometimes what we want is so much theology that we're confused out of obedience. That we think like, oh yeah, I need to think about that. Like, oh, that's deep. Like oh man, I need to process that a little bit. And James, and this is why I love James's letter, is James is so just like down to the brass tacks and nails. It's where the rubber meets the road. And he says, listen, you want the deep stuff, then actually do something about it. Then actually live out this way of Jesus. When you look at the life of Jesus and you look at your life, is there incongruity there? Are there things that don't line up? Then you actually need to do those things. See, just coming here, and this is where we can get things kind of turned around, is we think like, oh, we'll come to church, we'll hear these things, and somehow by osmosis, our lives will change. That's not how it works. It just like listening to someone talk about yoga doesn't make me good at yoga. If you want to become more like Jesus, you're gonna have to start doing things that Jesus did. You look at his life and you see the forgiveness. You see the grace and the mercy that he offered. How evident are those things in your life? You see, I'm here with you. It's not that I'm up on the stage because I have it figured out and I've got it and oh, you need to be like, no, I'm on the same journey you are. My challenge when I walk out those doors are gonna be, I need to do what it says. I need to not just teach things. My life, I need to do those. I'm right there with you. I'm just someone that's just trying to become more like Jesus, just like you. And your challenge isn't to hear something and to go, oh yeah, the preacher, he did a good job today. Oh, it was a good message. See, because sometimes we get in this habit that someone asks us like, oh, you went to church on Sunday, how was it? It was good, the band was good, the music was good. There were coffee and donuts, and we're like grading the thing as if it's something that like is good or not good. It's like, oh, it was kind of I'd call it a A- today. It was really good, but not great. No, the point of coming here is for us to be challenged to live differently. That when we walk out those doors, we do something different. You see, the thing is, our greatest regrets in life aren't gonna be tied to like things on the outside we didn't fix. It's not gonna be that health program that you should have started, working out. It's not gonna be tied to those things. but rather your greatest regrets in life will really be things that you didn't get cleaned up on the inside. It'll be that unforgiveness that you know you should have checked. It'll be that lack of grace. It'll be that judgmental heart that you never got cleaned up on the inside. And those things aren't cleaned up by looking into a physical mirror. Those things will never be fixed in your bathroom one morning going, oh, I see that thing in my heart that I need to change. The only way that those things will change is as we look at the life of Jesus, as we look at the teachings of Jesus, and that is a mirror that reflects back to us the things on the inside that need to change. See, this morning, I'm probably not telling you anything that you didn't already know. It's not like this is some massive revelation that listening to someone talk about yoga doesn't make you a yoga master. Just listening at church doesn't make you a better Christian, a better follower of Jesus. This isn't some revolutionary new teaching. In fact, I believe that the church's problem today, my problem, our problem today, isn't our education. See, I think we're actually educated beyond our level of obedience. Our problem is our obedience. Our problem is that we like to come into a room like this and be encouraged and be challenged and then not have to do a whole lot different when we go out there. Because we like to live our lives the way we want to live our lives. At least I do. The challenge, the struggle, is when we actually have to do something different. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to be challenged by this idea, this simple concept that it's the doing that makes the difference. We're going to say, okay, I understand that. I agree with that. Well, now you have to do something. So I have a question for you. I have a question for me, a question for all of us to contemplate, to think about. Today, the one question I want to leave you with is this. What do you need to do? What do you need to do? See, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you what you need to do because I believe God, that the Holy Spirit is able to communicate that to you. I just want to ask you this question. So for you, maybe your marriage is falling apart. And what you need to do is you need to talk to someone about it. Maybe the thing that you need to do is to get some counseling. Maybe you have an unresolved issue in your past. Maybe some unforgiveness. Maybe there's a relationship that's completely broken down. And what you need to do is you need to forgive that other person. See, I don't know what it is. I can't say what it is for you. I only know the things that I need to do for me. But I know all of us have at least one thing we need to do. Because here's the temptation. The temptation is to go, oh man, there's so many things I need to do. I need to do this better, and I need to change that, and I need to do this, and I need to start spending more time with these people and not spending time with these people, and I need to spend more time doing this thing and not that thing. And we make this huge list, and we overwhelm ourselves with the entirety of all the things that need to change. Listen, stop. What's one thing? What's one thing that you need to do this week? That's it. And actually, what I want you to do today is not just listen to me, but to do it, to write it down, to tell someone, to set an appointment, to set a reminder on your phone. Maybe the most spiritual thing you could do after this isn't to tweet something and like, oh, that was good. Maybe the most spiritual thing for you is to make an appointment on your calendar to talk to someone, to set up a reminder on your phone that I'm going to wake up 5 minutes early. And I'm going to read these things. I'm going to read the Word of God. I'm going to read the Bible. That's my first step. I'm going to call into the church. I'm going to set up an appointment and talk to somebody about X. What are you going to do? Because if we just sit here, we come and we listen to some music and we listen to some person talk, and then we go out and we say, oh, that was good. We're wasting our time. Because God's not into attendance. He's into life change. Our mission, don't we want to become more like Jesus? Don't we realize that that is the best possible way to live? Jesus says that he came to give life and life to the fullest. Do we believe him? And don't we want that? To get that, we've got to do something. So we're going to close like this. Here in a moment, we're gonna have prayer teams on either side. And listen, like I said, I believe in prayer. So maybe what you need is you need some encouragement. You need to look someone in the eyes and say, would you pray for me that I have the courage to do what I need to do? Here's what it is. Maybe you need to tell them. Maybe for you need to pray with someone because you don't even know how to go about it. I need to forgive this person, but I don't even know how. Would you pray that I could figure out how? That's doing something. The band is gonna sing one final song, and as they do, I want you to process and I want you to think, what is one thing you need to do? What do I need to do this week for there to be change? Because I know that just listening isn't gonna do it. That it's the doing that makes the difference. And the more we do it, the better we get at it. The more we pursue this life, the easier it becomes. Amen? Let's pray. God, I thank you.